About your audience, there's some things you should know just right off the bat, demographic wise. There's also some things you should know about your audience that aren't very surface level. Obviously, there are things like age, race, there are things that we can see, but there are deeper things in terms of their demographics that we can't see, that we need to sort of use communication to be able to find out. The situation calls for different approaches. So imagine you were doing a stand-up comedy routine at a bar as opposed to in front of a church. Two very different groups of people. You have to figure out what sense of humor do they have. Getting audience information, you can do this by getting surveys. We'll talk about it. Adapting to your audience. If you're looking out in the audience and nobody's making eye contact with you, or you start seeing people squinting like they can't see, or they're turning, if I turn my head to you like this, any guesses what that means? Exactly, right. Yeah, it's like, huh, what? So if you see that, you can sort of adjust your volume and be like, oh, but it looks like people can't hear me. I can sort of talk a little bit louder. And we'll talk about next class. Almost forgot. All right. Thank you, Walmart, for my $9 glasses. Okay. The first thing you need to know is that you're not getting a speech up here by yourself. This isn't a monologue. You're not just up here talking, although it seems like that for me sometimes. To whom am I speaking? Is it one person? Is it multiple people? Is it a whole lecture hall? Like, is there like 700 people in there? So it's a lot harder. The more people there are, it's harder to pick up on those nonverbal cues. What do I want them to know? What do I want them to believe? What do I want them to do? Am I trying to give them some kind of call to action? Am I advocating for something? Because as an audience member, you have to know what is my intention as a speaker. My intention right now is to inform you all, right? And that should be obvious. Because when you start getting confused, it's like, what is this person talking about? Like they're just sort of going on a tangent and weaving in and out. How can we achieve this in the most effective way? We're going to talk about how to organize your speech on Thursday to give it the most oomph, but you have to think, should I be giving metaphors, analogies, something like that? I'm sure we all know what this term is. If you're overly concerned with your own values, beliefs, well-being. And this matters because as a speaker, you can't just project from where you are. You have to understand where your audience is. It wouldn't make any sense if I was speaking a language nobody can understand. Y'all have to know so we're on the same page. But even as a listener, you have to be aware of this too. Because if you're sitting there in the audience and someone starts talking and they're going down a path you don't like, you can't just tune out because you don't like it. Because we all have a choice when we're confronted with information we don't like. We can either disapprove of it and learn nothing, or we can try to learn something, take another person's perspective into consideration. So, demographic-wise, there's age, there's religion, faith, spirituality, or the complete absence of these things. It could be that you're just talking to a soulless individual. I'm just kidding. Racial, ethnic, cultural backgrounds, because people can look similar, but it doesn't mean they are similar. They come from the same place. So, gender, sexual orientation. I don't think that's too important for your audience, unless you're like, if I wanted to talk about female circumcision, do you know what that is? It sounds painful enough, right? Basically what happens in places like Africa, it doesn't just happen in Africa, but that's where I learned about it. They basically sew it shut. It's messed up. But if you were giving that speech to a room of all dudes, it kind of loses its oomph. It doesn't really have the same amount of whatever. So that's something where gender does matter. Or if you're talking about the LGBTQ issues we see today, or LGBTQIA+, all that stuff, you sort of need to not be tone deaf, if that's the right expression. You just sort of have to be aware of what you're saying, how it might be misconstrued. And then finally, group membership. Y'all belong to a group, a high school. That is the group you belong to. But there are other groups you can belong to. Support groups, church groups, clubs, things like that. So we're going to do a little activity. You're going to find two different people. And you're going to ask them a demographic question that they are comfortable answering. So you could literally just be like, what group do you belong to? And not like racial, ethnic, whatever. Because Because it's a little awkward when it's like, what is it? It's like, well, it's obvious. But it's not always obvious. So you can ask that question, but there's nothing wrong with asking. There is something wrong with assuming that those things mean something. I'm white, what does that mean? I can't jump, or anything, There are many stereotypes, many things, but we can't just assume because of this, that means this. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. That's why I said there's nothing wrong with asking, is you're trying to get information. You're not trying to assume anything. So find somebody. I'll pause the recording. Oh, that's the one. Typing. It's important to know the different types of stereos. All right, there's surround sound. I'm sorry, that was really bad. It's an oversimplified image of a group. We can all think of a stereotype in our head right now. You assume all members are alike, and that's just irresponsible. It would be irresponsible for me to sit here and be like, oh, y'all are students, y'all are kids, I know more than you. That's baloney. That's hogwash. All right. Because I'm not like all other white male 26-year-olds, And you shouldn't think demographically like, oh, I am this, therefore I am this. You shouldn't do it to other people, don't do it to yourself. Simply put. Situational analysis. The size of your audience, I kind of talked about this, but if it's too big of an audience, anybody been in a room where it starts off really quiet, but then the more people that start talking, it gets louder and louder and louder? It's the same idea in a big room. If you've ever been in a huge auditorium, you know that you can barely hear the person next to you. But the physical setting also matters too, because in this room, there's a lot of echo. It's not like the sound is really getting dampened and you can't really understand me. And you have to know their disposition. We'll talk about what that word disposition means. But how do they feel about your topic? How do they feel about you? And how do they feel about the nature of what's happening? Oh, I just lost my job, so that's going to really affect you talking to me about how you need to get your benefits. So disposition is just another word for attitude. It's a frame of mind. It could be about a person, a policy, a belief, an institution, etc. This is how I feel about you. This is how I feel about gerrymandering. I know we talked about that. This is how I feel about people who don't have certain beliefs. Or this is how I feel about the school or the government or whatever. Because if you'd be like, oh, you can trust the government, I got one word for you, Tuskegee. That's all I got to say. All right. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Tuskegee. I'll try to spell it up here, if I can even. All right, just in case you don't look it up. They used to think that a high-grade fever would cure your syphilis. So what they did is they took Black men and they gave them syphilis. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting this all messed up. Let me backtrack. Basically, all you need to know about this is they could have cured them and they decided not to. It was HIV and AIDS, that's what it was. They thought a high-grade fever from syphilis could cure HIV and AIDS. So they intentionally inoculated people and they could have cured them, but they didn't. And they just let them go about their lives, living on with whatever. So anybody know about the Japanese internment camps of World War II? Exactly. All it took was being Japanese during World War II. You got rounded up and taken to a concentration camp just like the Jews in the Holocaust. So it's important to know these things because there are people out there who genuinely believe that the Holocaust never happened. And I don't know if that's genuine on their behalf or not, but like, if that's their disposition, you have a lot of work to do to try to get them to believe something. Because right now, y'all's brains are a lot more malleable than mine is. I'm older, my attitudes have set in. This is the moment in your lives where your attitudes are starting to develop. And they can be changed a lot easier now as opposed to if you're my age or if you're older than me. It's 10-year gap. It's not that much older than you, but getting your audience information. There are certain questions you can ask them. Fixed alternative is just like multiple choice. Scale. and then open-ended, where it's like you can put as much on the paper as you want to. The scale is also called a Likert scale. But let's go into each one of these. Do you know what gerrymandering means? You can say yes, no, or I'm not sure. That's fixed alternative. Scale. How often do you believe? You start by never going to always, or it can be, every day, never. So these words are kind of interchangeable. You can find something that sort of works for you. Open-ended. What do you think the boundary should be? You just give as much information as you want to. And you won't really have that opportunity in this classroom, but you will probably in other classrooms. So before you even start speaking, how do you think the audience is going to interpret your message? That's something you need to be wary of. Adjust to make the speech clear, convincing and concise. Concise kind of goes into these two, but you want to make sure anybody know what concise means? Or if you don't know what it means. To the point. To the point, exactly. Thank you, very concise. Because if it doesn't make any sense, but you're convincing and you're concise, it kind of takes away. He was convincing and he was to the point, but I don't really understand what he was talking about. Or vice versa. You can be not concise, but you're clear and convincing, where you just sort of rambled. That yes, your message was clear, it's just there was too much information. Or you were clear and concise, but I don't really feel moved by your topic. During your speech, here's what you can do. Adjust for unexpected circumstances. You stumble, your voice cracks. My voice still cracks. I'm 26, you'll probably hear it, I'm not gonna lie. But when that happens, don't worry about it. Just move on. Don't apologize, don't do any of that, just excuse me, and move on. Watch for feedback from your audience. Are they not looking at you? Are they looking at you? Are they giving you quizzical looks? Are they turning their head? What are they doing? Shouldn't be the end of the slideshow. Look at that, I gotta adapt during my presentation. Okay, all you really need to know after this is what we're doing next class. So I'll try to find that PowerPoint for you real quick. So next class, I couldn't find it. Next class, we're going to talk about organizing the body of your speech. There's sort of, methods you can use to sort of organize in the way that makes the most sense. Informative techniques require different organizing than a persuasive technique. So all you need to do is read chapter 9, do the homework, and show up. So that's all I got for you.